Okay, so are you ready to dive into something kind of intense?
Always up for a challenge. What are we tackling today?
Well, today we are cracking open Carl Jung's Red Book.
Ah, Jung. Not exactly a light read, is he?
No, not at all. But trust me, it's a wild ride. It's like, imagine a hidden diary,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
but it's filled with ancient myths, these cryptic symbols, and even glimpses into the future. Kind of eerie, actually.
Wow, and this is all Jung.
Yeah, it's his own exploration into the depths of the unconscious mind.
And what's incredible is Jung wasn't just theorizing, right? He, lived this stuff. He wrestled with these intense experiences, and it totally reshaped how he understood the human psyche.
Exactly. It's like we're unearthing this hidden world.
A world that had a huge impact on psychology, really.
Totally. But let's rewind a bit. We're talking early 1900s,
Okay.
time of massive upheaval, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And Jung, already a big name in his field, starts questioning everything, like traditional religion, the works, and he dives headfirst into mythology.
It's important to remember, though, this wasn't just an intellectual game for him.
Oh, absolutely not.
He called it an intoxication,
Right.
said it felt like he was in get this, an insane asylum of his own making.
Wow.
He analyzed those mythological figures with the same intensity he brought to his patients.
That's intense. So this deep dive into mythology, it was like going back to his roots, but also finding a way to unlock these secrets of the unconscious.
Exactly.
Wonder what his colleagues thought.
Right. But you got to admire his dedication to his ideas.
Totally. He sensed this deep connection between ancient myths and how our minds work. Something traditional psychology just wasn't addressing, really.
Yeah, it's totally new territory.
And it's right then, in the middle of all this, that he starts recording these dialogues with his soul.
Yeah, these internal debates about his path, his purpose, really fascinating stuff.
They sound intense. What were they like?
Imagine having a conversation with your deepest self.
Oh, wow.
You're questioning your beliefs, your direction, everything.
Heavy stuff.
That's what he documented, starting in 1902. But around 1909, that's when he realizes these dialogues are part of something bigger. A great and difficult work, he called it.
A great and difficult work. I like that. So what was so great and difficult about it?
What's really interesting is how his soul, at least how he perceived it, seemed to push him past traditional Christianity,
So not rejecting it outright, but
but looking for something more individual, a more personal experience with the divine.
right, that makes sense. And that's a theme we see throughout the Red Book, this push towards what he called individuation, this process of becoming a whole, unique self.
Exactly.
And it's not just his soul guiding him. He also talks about these incredibly vivid visions and dreams.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Some were so powerful, he felt like they were showing him the future.
Like premonitions.
Yeah. He even describes a dream that seemed to foreshadow World War I,
No way! Before the war.
years before any political tensions, yeah.
Imagine that. A dream so vivid, so full of, collective anxiety that it predicts a global conflict. That's really something.
It's a powerful example of how deeply connected he believed we are to something bigger.
The collective unconscious.
Yes, how our personal experiences can mirror and even, like, anticipate events on a global scale. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Totally.
It's almost like he's tapping into another level of reality beyond our everyday perceptions. And these visions weren't just these abstract prophecies or anything.
What were they like?
They're full of symbolism, especially mandalas.
Mandalas, those circular designs.
Yeah, he saw those as representations of the self, that central point of balance and wholeness we're all striving for.
Right, and Jung believed that this striving, this process of becoming a whole and integrated self, is individuation. And here's the thing. It's not about achieving this, perfect state of being.
Got it.
It's about acknowledging and integrating every part of ourselves,
Even the messy parts.
especially the messy parts, the parts we try to hide.
And that's where the shadow comes in, right? That was a game changer for me when I first learned about it.
It's a powerful concept. He wasn't saying to ignore those parts of ourselves we don't like. He said facing our shadow is essential for growth.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? What does that look like in the Red Book?
One of the most powerful examples. He calls it the symbolic murder of the hero. He uses the figure of Siegfried to illustrate it.
Okay, murder of the hero. This is where things get really interesting. Break it down for me. What did it represent for Jung?
Imagine Siegfried, this ultimate hero, embodying every societal ideal, all the expectations that Jung himself had taken on.
Right, okay.
By symbolically killing off Siegfried, he's rejecting those pressures to conform. It's a powerful statement. choosing his own path, even if it means going against the grain.
It's like saying goodbye expectations, hello self-discovery. But this death isn't the end, right? What happens after the hero is murdered?
Exactly. This death makes way for a new beginning. He describes it as the rise of the son of the depths, this new life, this consciousness emerging from his unconscious.
I love that image, the son of the depths. It suggests that even in our darkest parts, there's a potential for light and renewal. That's really hopeful. But this shift from external to internal didn't sound easy.
You're right. He describes it as a terrible struggle, this back and forth between light and darkness.
That makes sense. And that's where his exploration of the divine takes a really fascinating turn, right? He starts questioning the traditional Christian idea of God.
Yeah, it's not your typical Sunday school version anymore.
So not a benevolent God in the sky.
Not quite. Jung emphasizes that the divine can be disruptive, challenging our cozy ideas and forcing us to confront the unknown.
Both within ourselves and in the world.
Exactly. He even says the divine can make us sick.
Sick. Not literally, I'm guessing.
Right, not literally sick. He means encountering the divine can completely disrupt our comfy ways of thinking, pushing us past our comfort zones.
So it's about embracing the struggle, the uncertainty, even the darkness as part of the journey.
You got it. It's about living the paradox, as he called it, holding two seemingly opposite truths at the same time. The light and the dark, good and bad, conscious and unconscious. He believed it's in that tension, that space between the opposites where true growth happens, where real transformation is possible. It's a really intense book.
Yeah, I can see why it wasn't published until after his death. It's so personal, kind of unsettling at times.
Definitely.
But even with all the complexity, it deals with these universal human experiences, right? This search for meaning, this feeling of wanting to connect to something bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's where the pleroma comes in.
The pleroma.
Okay.
Okay. Now, that sounds like something out of science fiction.
It kind of does, doesn't it? Especially for someone rooted in psychology.
So what is it?
Think of a dream, right? But in this dream, all these opposites, light and dark, male and female, they all just merge.
No?
There's no separation, no conflict.
That's the pleroma.
That's kind of what he's getting at, yeah. It's like ultimate reality, where these two realities just disappear. He described it as this state of nothingness and fullness.
It's hard to wrap my head around that.
It's a concept that really defies our usual way of thinking.
So if it defies understanding, how do we even begin to approach it?
For Jung, it wasn't about thinking about the pleroma intellectually.
Okay, so not like a math problem you can solve.
Right. It was about experiencing it, or at least getting closer to that experience through individuation.
Ah, there's that word again, individuation. That striving for wholeness.
Yes. Integrating our conscious and unconscious selves.
So through that process, we get closer to experiencing this ultimate reality.
That was his idea, yeah.
It sounds almost mystical, like a spiritual journey as much as a psychological one.
It's definitely both, but Jung wasn't saying to follow a certain religion. It was about this deeply personal journey, stripping away the ego to reveal our true, authentic self.
And as we've been talking about, stripping away that ego, facing our shadow self, that can be really tough.
It's not easy, but he really believed that confronting our unconscious, that willingness to look at those darker parts of ourselves, it was the key to living a meaningful life.
Like truly meaningful.
Yes. He saw it as the key to unlocking our creativity, connecting with who we really are, and finding our place in the world.
I love that. You know, when I was reading through the material, Jung's take on good and evil really jumped out at me. It's not as simple as we often think, is it?
It's definitely one of the more challenging parts of his work. He really makes us question those rigid good and bad boxes we try to put things in.
Yeah.
He talks about this in the Red Book, especially through those figures he interacts with. Philemon, Elijah, Salome.
Right.
He's grappling with the idea that good and evil can be too simplistic, that those categories break down.
And that's where clinging to a narrow definition of good can actually be harmful, right?
Yeah.
Because we end up repressing parts of ourselves.
Exactly. Those parts we've judged as bad or unacceptable, those are often the parts that have the most potential for growth.
It's like that saying, the wound is where the light enters.
I like that. And he says the shadow isn't something to fear and push away. It's something to integrate, to bring into our awareness.
Instead of hiding it or pretending those parts don't exist.
Yes, because in those darker parts, in those hidden aspects, that's often where we find our greatest strengths. And he uses the symbol of the serpent a lot to represent this energy of the unconscious.
The serpent, now that's a loaded symbol.
Right. It can be dangerous, but also transformative.
So it's about finding that balance, that middle ground, embracing the contradictions.
Yes, it's messy.
It is. We've covered so much, even just in this conversation. Mythology, the shadow, the pleroma, good and evil. It's a lot.
It is a lot. What's your biggest takeaway? What really stood out to you from the Red Book?
For me, it's how important personal experience is in this whole process. Jung isn't just talking about theories. He's sharing his own struggles, his own raw experiences with his unconscious.
It makes it so much more relatable.
Yes. And it's like he's saying, hey, this is my journey. Now you go on yours. However messy or challenging it might be.
Inviting us to explore our own inner worlds.
Yes. And also reminding us that even though those journeys can be confusing, even terrifying at times, they can also be incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely.
It made me wonder, as you were talking about these personal journeys, are there any symbols or archetypes from the book that really resonate with you personally, that have played out in your own life?
That's a great question. For me, it's that serpent we were just talking about.
The serpent.
Yeah, it's this constant reminder that we can't just ignore those darker impulses, those shadow parts of ourselves.
Right, like we were saying, we have to find a way to engage with them.
Yes, if we want to grow and change.
It's like Jung is saying, don't be afraid of the darkness. Learn from it.
Exactly.
And let it guide you to a more whole, integrated self.
I love that.
And he's also saying that wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It's about making space for every part of us.
Even the parts that make us uncomfortable.
Especially those parts. And that's a lifelong process, right?
Yeah.
It's not like we figure it all out in one go.
Right. It's an ongoing journey. And the Red Book is proof of that. It's Jung's own journey of individuation, which, as you know, he never stopped.
It's inspiring in a way.
Is.
It makes me want to be more open to my own process.
As you were saying, those journeys can take us to unexpected places.
Speaking of unexpected places, there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. Jung's fascination with alchemy.
Oh, yeah. Not what you typically think of when you think psychology.
Definitely not. But it was a big part of how he saw the world.
It was, and it shows how he could see connections where other people didn't. He didn't think of alchemy just as this, primitive chemistry set. He saw it as a symbolic language.
Symbolic language for what?
For psychological transformation.
Okay, I'm going to need you to break that down for me.
Think about what alchemists were trying to do. Transform something ordinary, led into something extraordinary gold.
Right, like the ultimate transformation.
Exactly. And Jung saw that as a metaphor for what we do in our own lives. We're trying to take our shadow side, our flaws, and turn them into something better, something more integrated.
So alchemy, in a way, was like a map for this journey of individuation.
Exactly. He believed it offered these deep insights into how the psyche works. Just like those alchemists searched for the philosopher's stone, the thing that could turn lead into gold, we're searching for that thing that brings us wholeness.
It's amazing how Jung brought together all these different fields: psychology, mythology, religion, even alchemy. He saw these patterns, these connections that no one else was seeing at the time.
And that's why his work was so groundbreaking, and why the Red Book is still so relevant.
It reminds us that simple answers don't always exist, The journey of self-discovery, it's not always easy, and that's okay.
It's complex, and there's always more to learn and discover.
It's almost like he's saying, don't just focus on the logical stuff.
Yeah, don't be afraid to tap into your intuition.
Right. If we only focus on explaining everything, we miss out.
We miss out on those experiences where reason and intuition come together, where conscious and unconscious meet.
It makes you wonder, did Jung ever actually achieve this individuation thing? Or was it more about the journey for him?
It's the big question, right?
All right. Did he have it all figured out?
He wrestled with that himself throughout his life, from what I've read, and he never claimed to have reached some perfect state of wholeness.
Okay, so it's an ongoing process.
Always evolving, always growing.
Which is kind of how the Red Book feels when you read it.
Oh, totally. It's not like a textbook with all the answers. It's raw. It's honest. Jung's own struggles, his breakthroughs.
His own journey, with all its twists and turns.
Exactly. The uncertainty, the confusion, it's all there.
It's actually kind of freeing, it's okay to not have it all figured out.
It is. No one's got it all figured out.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to this work.
Jung reminds us that real transformation is an inside job.
It's your own journey, on your own timeline.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up our deep dive here.
Already. Time flies.
It does. What's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all of this?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway for me is to engage with that unconscious part of ourselves.
Even if it feels intimidating.
Yes. Yeah. Even if it feels overwhelming at times. Because Jung's saying there's this whole world of wisdom within us. We just have to listen.
And there are so many ways to listen to that inner voice, right? Paying attention to our dreams, spending time in nature, being creative.
Those moments of synchronicity when it feels like the universe is trying to tell us something.
Exactly. And that voice, it speaks in symbols, in metaphors.
So we have to learn to understand its language.
We're all alchemists in a way, taking our experiences and trying to make them meaningful.
I love that. And the Red Book can be our guide on that journey, a reminder that we're not alone in this process.
It's all about understanding ourselves better, connecting with that truest part of ourselves.
And living a life that feels truly authentic. Well, that about wraps us up for this deep dive into Carl Jung's Red Book. We hope you enjoyed exploring with us. Any final thoughts?
Safe travels on your own journey of individuation, everyone.
Beautifully said. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.